Hi there, this is Brent,
And this is Amanda,
and we are the Unreliable Narrators.
here to talk about the strangeness, the mystery, and the wonder of Gene Wolfe's prose.
What is time?
What is memory?
What is a person?
Is this reality?
Where are we?
Do we exist?
Have you ever considered that all your choices are what have brought you right here to this very moment?
Episode 1, Dumpster World, from the Alliterative Argentus, 2005. This is an epistolary short story in the form of a book review by an imaginary reviewer. The supposed book is called Dumpster World and is a novelization by Wolfe of a movie. The reviewer dislikes the book and compares it unfavorably with the movie, improbably starring Martin Sheen, Mariah Carey, and Brad Pitt as a robot. Several parenthetical comments to the reviewer's editor add a layer of absurdity to the already absurd story.
All right. Well, I know I suggested that we should start with Dumpster World because I thought that everything in it is basically a tightly wound nugget of Gene Wolfe's thinking and story ideas.
Sort of a capsule of his style.
Yes, but this almost did me in.
Already.
Yeah.
Episode 1 and you're almost done.
Yes. So I'm not even really sure where to start on some of this, so I'll just go through the first paragraph.
The first paragraph, you're just going to skip over the title information and the reviewer's name. Let's start with the first paragraph.
Okay. Yeah, I don't there it's just because Dumpster World, Dying Earth, basically a careless reviewer who just doesn't care. And yes, I repeated myself on purpose
because the reviewer does.
Yes,
a film noir film.
Yeah. Right off the bat, the funny thing for me was it regular price $28.95.
Yes.
However, if you get a Gene Wolfe signed limited edition, it reduces the value to $22.50.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of a encapsulation of a writer's insecurities and.
Well, yeah, a writer's insecurities, and then also what kind of seems to happen with certain authors who don't ever get famous. They sign essentially every copy of their book,
mm-hmm.
and then a signed copy is definitely not worth more.
Yeah.
Although the opposite, of course, of what happened with Wolfe, as my bank account can attest.
So, and then the Vice Squad. It's the clamping tool instead of the police detectives. Yeah,
never a master of plot, Wolfe, misspelled, here escapes the Vice Squad, or whomever deals with plots.
Yes. The editor's like, oh, just fix this. Fix it, please. It's like,
yeah. Laziest reviewer ever.
Yeah. And then he confuses plot with turbidity.
Yeah. Plot with turbidity, and what has been produced is a turbine, so some classic wordplay, without bearings, that is to say, an unbearable book.
Yeah, so, and this is where I kind of almost started.
This is what almost did you in?
Yeah,
right out of the gate.
Because it's like turbidity, it's like turmoil, smoke, smoky, murky.
Right.
Haziness in a fluid, and then produced a turbine without bearings. So a turbine takes kinetic energy from a fluid, which is murky and all muddy, and it turns it into energy, but it has no bearings. So and bearings are there to make a frictionless movement. So it's just.
But bearings are also what you take when you are trying to find your way somewhere. Bearings are directions.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So it's all murky, it's grinding, it's energetic, but it's not going anywhere, and it's just spinning and spinning.
Yes.
And this is why I say this almost did me in.
Right, because in the first paragraph, you've got layers of wordplay and imagery play that are incredibly complex and also just absurd. This doesn't seem to be in the service of like a clear point. The point itself seems murky.
Yes. And you got to love them for it. So,
well, of course you do.
So I think you ask a question there, like, what's the point
what's this in
of all,
service of?
Yeah, what is it in service of? And there is, before I get there, like went through and I counted, this is my count, so there's probably many more, but there's at least 50 puns and play on words and misspellings and careless choices of grammar and words in a story or
it's an epistolary short story.
Yeah, an epistolary short story that's 574 words, and that's counting the title and the author's name. So we're we have almost every 10 words there's some sort of wordplay here. So on top of the wordplays, there's also 3 other themes that come in there. It's the literary or precise writing.
Right.
There are complaints about the author's social commentary. And then there's the tail end accusation that the reviewer flubs that he gets pleasure from tormenting his readers.
Or he's afraid of getting pleasure from tormenting his readers.
Yeah. No, that could... I was, given the unskilled nature of the reviewer, I assumed that he was saying that she thought that he got pleasure from it, but then she picked the wrong word. So
right. I would also say, another theme is the financial value of writing. Because we get 2 comments about price per word of writing, in which the supposed reviewer makes fun of people for writing for a cent a word and then reveals at the end that they write for half a cent a word.
Yeah.
So
with the offer to do non-actionable rumors.
Right. Yeah. Well, so that seems like a decent, list of themes or ideas that are going on in this 500 and some word story. You counted... I didn't try to count the wordplay because it seemed like every time I looked at something, there was another one that I hadn't noticed before. And so I didn't think that I could come up with one. But I did try to look up all of the French language wordplay and see if the French phrases were also miswritten, punning. And they are, each of them are.
Are they?
Yeah. So, hardly a promising venison for a writer of Wolfe's frisson. Well, frisson is a French word for thrill or excitement, but venison is not a French word, even though it's spelled to look like one. And as far as Google can tell, it's just a misspelling of venison, which is funny, right? Like, meat. For a writer of Wolfe's tension, he's a wolf. He's hunting. I don't even know how deep to go with that.
Yeah.
That yeah. And then you get an animal again in the second column. And my French pronunciation is terrible, but that's okay. Atre dans la panda, which should be panade, not panda, but we get a panda bear in here. Which would be to be in trouble. The French phrase would be to be in trouble. But to be in the panda is also, I don't know, that's at least amusing. I'm not sure if we're in the panda for musical jests or we're in trouble for musical jests. And then mal de Mozart being, of course, a composer, but the phrase being mal de mare, which is to be seasick.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I didn't count the wordplay, but just the 4 times French appears, it's also, wordplay.
Wordplay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I tried looking up the different categories of these wordplays and puns, and there's many different. Some of these fall under what's called egg corn, which is where you mishear something and you think that you imagine what it was based off of your current knowledge. So it comes from a story about a lady who heard somebody talking about acorns, misheard it, and so she repeated it, egg corns.
Right. Which is great because the reviewer's name is Keebler Egg.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yep. So, and one of the more famous or funny examples I was thinking of was in Life of Brian, where it's like, what did he say? He said, blessed are the cheesemakers.
Right.
But cheesemakers, what's so, it's like, oh, it's just metaphorical for all manufacturers of dairy products. Like, so it's like the not getting caught up with like, oh, what was actually said? It's inserting your own interpretation in there and then continuing on.
Right.
And then there was also the malapropism.
Yes.
Which is somebody thinking they have the correct word, but comically putting in the wrong word.
Right, where they've just mistaken one similar word for...
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then there's a dozen other categories, which I was going to go through and I was kind of tallying them up, and then I realized it doesn't really matter.
But he's basically hitting all kinds of wordplay.
Yeah.
As he goes through. I wonder if he had a checklist that he was like, "Whoa, I haven't gotten."
Are we already getting on Wolfe the Engineer? Like cat?
Well, I mean, I feel like we lost an opportunity already to talk about Wolfe the Engineer because in that first paragraph, a turbine without bearings, Wolfe the Engineer would care very much about a turbine without bearings.
Yeah, that was my bad there. I actually kind of thought about that as I was typing out my notes, and then I just forgot.
Forgot that. Well, how can you keep track of all of the things?
Yeah, because I was definitely spinning as I was trying to analyze this story.
Were you spinning like a turbine without bearings?
Yes.
Okay. And then, of course, that imagery carries over into the second paragraph where the review, the quote review, they will recall that the film revolved... And in parentheses, very much the correct word.
Yes.
About Martin Sheen's struggle to prevent, et cetera, et cetera. And like that play, I felt like that's where I started to spin myself.
Yeah.
Confusedly.
Mariah Carey is a rabbit or a camel and a music.
Right.
I feel like he's making fun of the play in the Book of the New Sun.
Well, yeah, because he says, the reviewer says that the one redeeming characteristic of this book is that there was no play within a play, which, yes, the whole thing is a play within a play, within a play, within a play, because it's a novelization. Well, it's a faked review of a faked novelization of a faked movie.
Yeah.
But it didn't have a play within it, so.
Yeah. Not a dark movie, a film noir film.
Right.
So
it's a dark, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Well, I looked up I looked up a number of things. One of the things I looked up was Earth.net, their review of Dumpster World, which they just had a couple paragraphs from Mark Arameni on there, and he called it Wolfe's least serious work, which I thought was kind of an interesting way to look at it, like seriousness versus unseriousness, because as we've already described, this is a dumpster, if you will, full of jokes.
Yeah.
But are they jokes that have no serious rooting or no serious grounding? We both talked about being, spun up or wrapped up or confused or defeated by the layers going on here. But do you think that there's no serious grounding, or is there some serious grounding and the silliness is not for the sake of silliness? The silliness is for the sake of something else.
That's a good question. I think that the silliness is for the sake of something else. And in some way, I think it is a very serious work. And I, as I was reading through this, I was reminded of another author's work, C.S. Lewis's Paralandra.
C.S. Lewis, who's that? Just some guy.
Yeah, it's just some hack that some people read.
Okay.
But there is a section in Paralandra where Ransom, who's the main character, he is sitting, talking to a voice on one of the islands. And he's going back and forth with the voice. And there's indications in there that it's Ma'el, which would be the equivalent of God in the story. So in the quote here, as he's sitting there, it says, "It is not for nothing that you are named Ransom," said the voice. And then Ransom continues to think about several things, and kind of in typical C.S. Lewis fashion, he just calls the plot hole out. And it's like, if I would have thought of that, it would have been a pun. And so that's how Ransom knows he's not just talking with himself. He's actually talking with somebody else.
Right, because he would not regard the fact that he was named Ransom and was being called to be a ransom as a serious thing. He would have thought of that, the character would have thought of that as a joke.
Yeah. And the voice replies, "My name is also Ransom," which that's where we get, yes, you actually are talking with God. And I think what the hack C.S. Lewis took an entire book to get to.
Yeah, that's just a carelessly tossed off novel with no depth whatsoever.
Exactly.
But whatever.
Carelessly ripped off from Paradise Lost.
Which was carelessly ripped off from, I don't know, Genesis or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Works that will have no bearing at all in the future of this podcast.
Yep. Turtles all the way down.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. So what Lewis carefully constructed over a entire narrative, I think we're getting a similar thing with Wolfe here, except he always writes from a perspective that's so attached to his character. So he's not really writing as Wolfe, he's writing as this reviewer. And she misunderstands things, she's careless, she doesn't pay attention to what she's saying, and we're so attached to the psyche of that character, so we're getting her thoughts, her sensory inputs, and there's kind of where it lands. Like, instead of a whole gentle lead up to a pun,
right,
we just get a continuous firing of puns and wordplay. An
avalanche, or
avalanche.
A tsunami.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think, to kind of finish out what I was saying there, there's the short story within the story,
right,
of where they're all in the hospital in the Book of the New Sun, and where they're doing the storytelling competition, and it's the rooster and the angel comes down, and they're kind of having a tete-a-tete and going back and forth. And one of the things that the angel says, it's like, God's just as mysterious to me as he is to you. Like, we're closer to each other than I am to God. And so there's kind of that insertion of, well, even angels like mishear things, and angels have egg corns, is kind of, I guess, where I'm going.
So that maybe part of the serious point is that as created beings, as dependent beings, we're all fumbling around in the dark to some extent, and misunderstanding to some extent, because our perceptions are not complex enough or finely tuned enough to understand all of what's going on.
Yes. I think that's a good encapsulation of what I...
Which, to be fair to your original point of why you wanted to start with Dumpster World, because that is an overriding theme in Wolfe's fiction as a whole. And the fact that it comes through so, well, I don't know, I think it comes through very effectively in this silly fanzine short story in a deliberately satirical section of the fanzine, that comes through, just shows how much Wolfe is a whole and consistent mind. He doesn't, I think, well, you've objected before in our conversations to people calling Wolfe's fiction a puzzle box, as though he was setting out to puzzle or confuse people, when I think he's setting out to make something clear. It's and so he writes consistently from a set of assumptions or a set of beliefs or a clear understanding of the world, and it'll come through. He is him in this as much as he is him in The Book of the New Sun or Soldier of the Mist.
Yeah. Which I guess is partially what I would be arguing here, if this is
an argument.
Yeah, if this is an argument, is that at the center of each Gene Wolfe story is a really bad dad joke. So,
do we need to see if we can contact one of his children and ask if he was fond of them? Or do we just know that he was?
This is just my headcanon here, but
right.
I imagine that he had to take up writing because his family got tired of the dad jokes. But
that seems a pretty good headcanon.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if any of this fits into the larger conversation at all, but I did do a little bit more research that I didn't get to bring up yet, so I want to show off my homework, I guess.
Yeah.
All of the actors that he named appeared in a movie or TV show in 2005, which is when this came out.
Oh.
But none of them seem to have anything to do with this imaginary film noir film, Dumpster World. So Martin Sheen was in West Wing during, for several years.
Yeah.
And 2005 is during the run. Brad Pitt was in Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Deborah Voigt, who I'd never heard of, was in a film version of an opera, La Gioconda, which is by the Italian composer Amilcare Ponchielli. So, don't know anything about it. Mariah Carey, actually, I didn't look up, so now I realize I failed. In that.
I'm sure she was in some music video.
Probably. And Mickey Rooney was in the voice of Santa in some cartoon. So, yeah. So they were all active actors at the time, but not in anything together and not in anything. And I couldn't find a movie either in the end of 2004 or in the beginning of 2005 that could have been a stand-in space opera. I mean, obviously, Wolfe would not be limited to that time frame, but I was wondering if there was something that was immediate that might have prompted this, but I couldn't track anything down.
Okay. I do have to say that when I was reading the Brad Pitt section where he's B6,
yes,
I misread because it's luberous.
Lubriciously is how it's spelled, but I think it's a misspelling of lubricious, which is supposed to be sexy and enticing.
Yes.
Lubricating, as it were.
Yes. And it's like, oh, wait, mechanical or...
Yeah, mechanical lubrication or...
Mm-hmm. And then the whole way that he is enticing is you can't tell it's Brad Pitt because of the costume and the cosmetics.
Is he sexy because we can't tell he's Brad Pitt?
Yeah. I kind of had to laugh at that one.
Yes.
So, but...
Wondering if Gene Wolfe saw him in Fight Club and knows what he looks like or not. Yeah. I thought that was pretty interesting that he's completely unrecognizable is what makes him, or it is described right along with him being incredibly attractive. I also thought it was hilarious that all of the action of the movie is replaced by talk. So in this book, the thunderous booms and bangs, the snarls and terrifying growls of monsters flapping through outer space are replaced by talk. And so is everything else.
Yes.
Which is pretty fantastic. And so then I don't know what it is that the robot B6 is saying that's so enticing. Or maybe it's just providing the lubrication to the turbine without bearings. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I was imagining a poor community college version of Waiting for Godot.
Oh, that would be good.
Yeah, because it's like if it's all been replaced by talk, and
then we have a robot in fantastical costume, or being described in fantastical costume because it's a book now, talking. In 2005, also these are maybe just random connections, but maybe there's something there. Gene Wolfe published Starwater Strains, which is a collection of short stories. The Wizard Knight Omnibus came out because the Wizard Knight came out in 2004.
Okay.
And then his only other publication was a chapbook called Christmas Inn, which he produced at the last minute for a publisher who needed a story to send as a Christmas present to subscribers. And the previous author had failed to deliver. And so Wolfe produced Christmas Inn, which is about a woman named Mary Christmas.
Oh, gosh.
So, this is not the only time he made wordplay, is basically what I'm saying.
Kind of an aside here to your comment about the chapbook. He seemed very willing to participate in, maybe I'm choosing my words poorly here, but like gimmicky, contrived types of, it's like, oh, we're going to do this, and we need a story of 100 words, or I specifically need a Christmas story, or he seemed much more willing than I at least imagine a lot of authors are like to enter into the constraints of somebody else's like publishing gimmick.
Well, for an author of such literary talent and style, such an artist in the sense that he consistently created great art, he was very willing to be limited by expectations, but that's where the creativity really seems to flourish. I mean, this is literally just Dumpster World is just a short story in a fanzine, and I can't imagine that he got paid for it.
Yeah,
it was just I don't know anything about the publication history of it, but this is a fanzine of a pretty limited run. A few publications a year, for a few years, not even that long. And Wolfe provides here a short story that's hilarious, layered, intelligent, complex, and stylish, I think.
Yeah.
And it was for just, something that was literally printed on printer paper, stapled together, and mailed out for $3 an issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, he does participate in these kinds of things, and he doesn't seem to be bothered by the request, at least not artistically bothered by it. Whatever his, I don't know how many times he refused to do things, or what percentage of things he accepted, but we see a lot of his stuff appearing in these random places.
Yeah, which is also an aside to my side. It makes it difficult to track down some of these lesser known works, because it's like, wait, what? Where?
Well, starting this project is, tracking down obscure things, uncollected things.
Yeah.
And it is kind of hard to come up with them. Yeah. Well, any other last thoughts before we move on? And by move on, I mean wrap up.
No, dying Earth genres can be summarized by dumpster worlds, so...
Well, it takes us from Jack Vance to New Sun to a dumpster world, space opera, novelization, book review thing.
With Mariah Carey.
All right. Well, we're the Unreliable Narrators, Amanda Patchen and Brent Towle. And as Gene Wolfe said, knowledge is soon changed, then lost in the mist, an echo half heard.